So let's go over the model. Okay, let's go over the model. A lot of times, folks say to me, I really want to gain some fitness. I want to get stronger. I want to get stronger. But there's a process of how you actually do it. So let's go back to the first couple of slides that we talked about. We incorporate the science of cycling with the art of professional coaching. So I'm going to describe this model as it relates to training. So the CIS performance training methodology looks like this. It's a commitment, ownership, and responsibility to excellence. So you commit to what you do, you own up to what you do, and be responsible and accountable for what you do to show the art of your excellence in your craft. That's what the core concepts around what this program or this process is or this methodology is. There's a couple phases. So as we go through these phases, you'll see that they're based in quadrants. Okay. So as I walk through the process, you'll see in a succinct order how these things actually flow. First phase is general foundation heart rate-based training, as we've talked about on the previous slide. So the key focus around that is the discipline and training and focus. Once again, it's going back to my martial arts experience of learning how to train with a high level of focus. Because at the end of the day, if we don't build that strong foundation, we can't continue to keep moving forward to get to the excellence of what we're talking about as in our core values or core competence. Number two, attention to detail and consistency. Those that are on my program know what I'm talking about. It's attention to detail and consistency in what you do. The easiest workouts are the hardest ones to do. Why? Because of the fact that it requires attention to detail and focus and consistency. Lastly, it's about heart rate control and cadence control, managing those efforts across the board. It's easy to ride hard, but it's hard to ride with efficiency and control. Key focuses in those areas around phase one is heart rate control and the observation of aerobic power output. So once again, we're not talking about power as other people might think it is. We're talking about aerobic power because cycling is an aerobic sport, okay? And it's an endurance sport. In order to get to a power output, there's a couple key things we have to do prior to us getting there. So there's some key disciplines as it relates to skill development, and I'll go over those key pieces. But first, we start with a baseline type of testing, which we do a ramp test, which is describes the amount of a maximum aerobic power that you can produce aerobically and anaerobically. Okay, that's the first phase. The second phase is a 20-minute FTP test, which describes your 20-minute power profile and your 20-minute zone 4 heart rate and training zones that come with that environment. And we also do a 5-mile fit test that talks about control and focus in a certain range and a certain cadence band and chain ring. So when we talk about this baseline testing, there are 3 key pieces of this skill development that we talk about. Endurance training, which is zone 2 heart rate, which is to improve efficiency, 90 plus RPMs. So when I say 90 plus RPMs, a lot of times when folks come on the program or just in training overall, we say, okay, my comfortable training zone or my comfortable cadence is 75, 80 RPMs. Well, I'm forcing you to go above what you're comfortable doing. Okay, so we say, allow the uncomfortable to be comfortable, because you're going to learn these types of skills as it relates to this type of methodology and training to help you do the other things later in the program or later in your training. Second phase is cadence. So once again, zone 2 and 3, we talked about zone 2 around improving efficiency, but zone 3 is about improving power production, aerobic power production. This is where the rubber kind of really meets the road. Okay, so 90 to 120 RPMs and understanding how to truly spin up. So one of those questions that we asked in our poll was, can I hold cadences of 120 plus RPMs with no difficulty? Well, the key thing here is to learn how to spin up and to accelerate when we need to accelerate. Third phase is Tempo and force development. Once again, phase 3, which is zone 3, 50 to 90 plus RPMs in both of these key phases. So you're going to learn how all these key components are driven in, you're going to love this one, in your small chain ring, folks, all in your small chain ring. No big chain ring work here at all, because you have to learn how to pedal first before you do the hard things second. Okay. So phase 2 talks about the specificity of training as it relates to heart rate and power production or power generation. So these key components around this phase 2 is mental toughness. These workouts in this environment are very difficult to do. Once again, it's hard to ride with focus. It's very difficult when it comes to these harder workouts. If we don't focus on mental toughness, once again, this goes back to my martial arts training. A lot of my training was all about mental toughness. Physically, we could do everything, but mentally, if we don't apply ourselves in the effort, we miss the boat. Second phase is repeatability and adaptability, because in this phase, you're repeating efforts over and over and over and over again to adapt to the efforts going forward. If we only do them for a certain amount of time, we don't create those synapses from the brain to the working muscles to repeat and repeat and repeat and adapt and repeat and adapt, so forth and so on. Third phase is mastery towards excellence. Once again, let's go back up to our core, our values here: commitment, ownership, responsibility, and excellence, to truly master your art of cycling. That's, we spend a lot of time, on our bicycles, so why not master the art of cycling? So when we talk about the focus, it's heart rate control still, gearing, and power production is the core focus around this phase 2 environment. So when we talk about specificity, we do a baseline comparison testing from the first time that we start in the skill development so that we can see where our numbers are before we get into the specificity of training. And that happens in the middle of zone 4 or phase 3 to phase 4. Okay, zone 4 heart rate, what we're talking about, pushing that lactic ceiling higher, or that threshold ceiling higher. That's where, when you see these FTP tests, that when we first start doing these FTP tests, they say, okay, well, I just can't get to the level. Well, we haven't pushed the ceiling higher to support an effort of that type of magnitude, which creates mental toughness, repeatability, adaptability, and mastery towards excellence. 93 to 95 RPMs is the cadence band in that range. In phase 5, we talk about speed. What we talked about before is it's not how fast you go, it's how you go fast. It's all based around gearing and cadence control. 97 to 102 RPM zone 5, which is to sustain a higher level of maximum power output, which is exactly why we do a ramp test, is to get to that level, to support a higher effort in that level. Then lastly, it's about power production. How do we truly drive power? It's zones 3 through 5 plus, and it's all the cadences that I just described earlier in this process. 90 plus RPMs, 90 to 120 RPMs, 50 to 90 plus RPMs, 93 to 95 RPMs, 97 to 102 RPMs. And there are many more that go into the core of specificity in climbing, sprinting, and time trialing, okay? So when we really think about this whole opportunity, it's a cross between the small chain ring, big chain ring, and then small chain ring and a big chain ring, as you see the correlation between endurance in phase 1 through power into phase 6. It's a cross between all these cadence bands and all the big chain ring and the small chain ring. So I often hear this, and folks come on the program and they say, okay, I don't want to drop my fitness. I'm going to lose fitness. I came on the program with a different level of fitness. Well, based on science and overcompensation, now let's get into the science of it. Here's what's actually happening in training in any program that any coach offers if they do it correctly. Here's what actually happens. So when you really focus on training properly in skill development, you'll notice the training curve goes down, dips to phase 2, comes up to phase 3, levels off in phase 4, extends up to phase 5, and goes all the way out to phase 6. That's what your training curve looks like. So when you think about the true actuality of training with purpose, as we talk about, when you learn skills first, because we're not working so much on the stress levels, because it's heart rate based, but you're going to get some skills and some development. You're going to get some fitness that goes along with that, so that when you start getting to the specificity of training, you'll see that training curve improve, and your fitness will improve. To what ends up happening is this: your new baseline becomes that. See the difference between where your baseline was prior to the endurance level to your new baseline? That what happens year over year over year of consistent training and focus as it relates to discipline and training and focus, which is the foundation of training, which is kind of like what we do in martial arts. It's a white belt environment. You learn the basics and the foundation of training so that you can compound all of those components on top of one another. Okay. Once again, this is our 80-20 rule. 80% of what you do is in phase 1, 20% of what you do is phase 2.